The title here, A Journey of Self-Discovery and Healing, is revelatory in the sense that I'm not here to tell you today exactly how each herb does what it does, or what herb is good for this, or what herb is good for that, how to heal arthritis, or what are the 10 best uses of calendula. Although that has some value, I recognize that. It's also that's abundant. The beauty of vitalist herbalism is that through this journey of self-healing and discovery, or self-discovery and healing, you're actually engaged with the fluid dynamics of nature. All right, so I really wanted to start by sharing my story. I call it becoming a bioregional herbalist. I've used that phrase, that expression for 8 to 10 years now. It was the title of all of my field classes for a number of years. As I began to see the process more clearly in hindsight, how I had come to the place that I was in terms of how I was learning about herbs, the knowledge that I was gathering, and the way that the various aspects of knowledge gathering had coalesced in me in a very unique form. So I called that becoming a bioregional herbalist. It was sort of a amalgamation of various inroads, and various perspectives I had attained, and how that coalesced together within me. And that was ultimately the grounds and the foundation for which vitalist herbalism, or vitalism, could take root within me. And so when I started all of this, I really had no guidance, very little guidance, I should say. And there was no template, to be sure. I understood that there was such a thing as an herbalist, but I would say I had a very rough view of what that meant. Somebody perhaps in an office with jars of herbs, maybe capsules. I didn't even know much about tinctures at the time. Maybe an acupuncturist, or some indigenous person in a primarily natural surrounding, or in a village of some sort, that integrated the plants from around, that grew around them, not as products, but as living entities that they had relationship with. I could use this language now, but I couldn't quite conceptualize it in that way, but that was my rough understanding. And that was a very mysterious and intriguing way of life for me. Um, in some regards, something I aspired to, but at the same time, I wasn't really overly committed to that. I don't think I understood it enough and wasn't really ready for that sacrifice. But nonetheless, as I surrendered to my life, that being the internal calling that I experienced within, and broke free of some conventional constraints in my mind, at the very least, of what I thought life should look like, or what I thought I should be doing, that opened up a whole new realm of possibilities to me. And on that path, I started meeting people, started finding myself in situations and places where these early stepping stones to becoming a bioregional herbalist were placed before me. Surrender to the unknown was essentially a great component of that early journey. And that's why I see it as a formative principle, you might say, for becoming a bioregional herbalist and moving into the experience of vitalist herbalism. So on that path, I surrendered to the unknown, great pain to myself and reluctance, and tried to break away from that path many times. Nonetheless, the path would readjust itself to place itself at the front of my feet, so that my next step would be on it once again. So it's obviously, in hindsight, it was obvious to me that there was something much greater than myself at work here, because despite my efforts and despite my reluctance, you might say, or self-sabotage in whatever way I could conjure it, now, I was nonetheless finding myself back on that path. And so it did take courage at some level to make those steps, because I was cutting ties from who I once was, or what I once thought I was, to embark on this path. And in that way, I was opening myself to new opportunities. And this is a a micro view on what the macro or broad spectrum principle of leading with the heart, that I like to say, or opening of the heart, surrendering to or becoming receptive within the heart mind as a core concept or principle of vitalist herbalism. And in that process, I certainly did need to meet face to face with my inability to trust, first of all, myself, and then later to trust in the offerings that were being made to me from the world around me. This wasn't, again, something that was delineated ahead of time. I wasn't given a roadmap. I wasn't given a syllabus. I wasn't told what to expect from this class. It was a full washing in the wild rivers of life that brought me to this knowledge. But I would like to say I would I don't know where I would be on this path or what it would look like were it not for the various peoples that I met along the way. It's hard to recall any of them that weren't, by their own identification, indigenous people, tribal people with a connection to the land. And that was maybe in part something I sought out, but not so intentionally, so as to sculpt such a path as it nonetheless came out to be. In fact, I'll finish up this story, very abbreviated, but pivotal point on this story was when I was staying with a friend who I had met at a permaculture design course that I just completed in Brazil. And she and a fellow, well, she was a Brazilian, and a fellow American had left on a couple days journey to go back to her home, where she was going to introduce him to some indigenous people she knew, so that he could commence with some projects he wanted to do with indigenous people with his permaculture skills. And so I had remained within the community in the somewhat remote wilderness, where we had the permaculture course. And an elder female of the community turned to me one morning and said, in Portuguese, spoke to me and said, "John, why didn't you go with Lercy, the name of the woman, and Bobby, the name of the American? Why didn't you go with them to go meet with the Indians?" And I looked at her. I can still recall the look, the appearance of her face as I looked at her, somewhat stunned, thinking, how would she come to this? How would she know something that I'm not even aware of myself yet until until now? And when she asked me that question, she knocked some sense into me. That was in the mid-afternoon, and I startled to my senses, and I looked for a moment or two, and I said, "You're right." And I grabbed my things, and I ran down the path, because we were a couple of miles from any road. It was only footpaths in and out of this small eco village. And I made a mad dash down the path with my pack, all my belongings, to get to the small town before the last bus left. And not too long down the road from there, staying at Lercy's house, she had gone to meet with these Indians, these Indios, and I had stayed home, being recently inspired to go study herbs. I thought maybe I would go back to the US to do so. And I recall I was on her computer looking at herbal programs in the Southwest. This is about almost 25 years ago. And she busted back into her apartment, and she started yelling in Portuguese, "John, John, they asked for you. They asked, where's the other one? Where's the other one? What are you talking about?" And so when they arrived to meet with these Indians, the first thing he said to them is, "Where's the other one? Why didn't you bring him?" And so she came back to get me. And when I arrived, it felt like I had made it home, and I was with my family. And so that was a big part of me coming home, I think, to myself. It's like I met with this man on a different realm, and where he saw me, who I am. And oddly enough, it turned out that their tribe, and I didn't even know this until I left the country, their tribe was well known for their work with herbs. And they had an herb shop that they brought me to the following day after I began staying with them, and started teaching me, and I was organizing their herbs and learning about their ways. So That was an formative experience for me that I never could have planned. That's something that just grabbed me like a warm hand out of the darkness and pulled me into this hole that that Tway would pin me down and would let me get out of for a while, because he saw something in me, and he felt, I could speak for him through my senses, that he felt obliged to 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 trust in that and to do his duty to help me see. So that to me was a condensed version and my own personal experience of what I'm relaying here on this first slide. But hopefully that sets the tone of for you of what I feel about vitalist herbalism.